Hello, welcome back to my garden. Today, as I kind of said we were going to, or maybe hopefully we were going to, but we are going to today, plant up my dahlias. I've already been doing some work here off camera in preparation of the planting. I put in a bunch of different stakes for the various dahlias that I'm going to be planting, and I laid out the dahlias in the way that I think will hopefully work out well. And I'll explain a little bit more in detail about that in a second. But first, if you guys pick up any wind noise, I'll try to edit it out. But if you do, I do apologize. Very windy today. This is also why it's important to have all these stakes in the ground for the dahlias. Dahlias, as beautiful as they are, the stems are not very strong. And unfortunately, with a high enough wind gust, they will break. It's happened to me before many a times. First thing though, before we get into planting, is I want to mention what I've done to this bed over the winter time. And I think I've talked about this in previous videos, maybe, I'm not sure. Either way, I will go over it again because we do have some new subscribers to the channel. Thank you to all the new subscribers. When I made this bed, as with all the beds here in the flower garden, I did it as no dig. So I cut the grass down as low as possible, and then I put down cardboard and compost. And so it's been about at least 3 years, maybe even 4 years, that I've had this bed. Over that period of time, the various insects in the ground, worms, whatever, have brought some of that good nutrients down. So now I can dig 3 to 4 inches, maybe even up to 6 inches down below ground level and have good, healthy soil. And I have accomplished this by doing the compost, and every year add a little bit more compost and then the various mulches on top. But I wasn't happy with the bed overall last year, and many of the dahlias I had in the ground had been there for at least 4 years. So I wanted to dig them up and divide them. So the bed was emptied out. Started off by adding in more compost. I threw in some pea gravel on top of that to help again with that drainage. I added in some composted cow manure into all of that. And then about a month ago, I received a load of composted horse manure, which is fantastic. Which is, if I zoom in and show up, you may see all these chunks, these nuggets. It's composted horse manure. There's no smell, it's not continuing to degrade, but it does look a little unsightly. Actually, as I was walking around putting in all of these stakes, I could feel the nuggets just breaking down under the weight of my foot. Next week, we're going to get a lot of rain, so that should also help all these nuggets break down, adding more organic matter to the ground, more hopefully nutrition to the ground for all these dahlias. From my limited knowledge and understanding, dahlias are fairly heavy feeders, so they do need good nutritious soil. Though dahlias do not like wet feet, hence the reason for the pea gravel being in there to help with the drainage, and I mixed in some pine bark into the ground as well, again to help with that drainage. They also don't like the intense heat that we can get down here in growing zone 8A. So if I can keep the roots and the tubers cooler with a layer of mulch, all the better. This black weed fabric area over here, the first 8 feet of it, I hope that over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years to plant up with yet more dahlias. I love dahlias, and I love all the different varieties of dahlias, and I'd like to expand my collection of dahlias. So eventually this first 8 feet over here will become part of the dahlia bed. The dahlia bed itself is 8 feet deep, but I plan on having a hedge in the back and a hedge on the side, which will be about 2 feet deep. So that really gives me about 6 feet of planting space. Over time, closest to the front of the border, I hope to have filled in with low growing or short dahlias. They have several varieties of dahlias which are low growing, and I have one which was a singular plant last year, and now it's divided into at least 2, and I may have another tuber up on the potting bench, which may come to fruition later on. It's inflammation. It gets to about a foot and a half, puts on little red flowers if I'm not mistaken. Then there's also Bishop's Children. Now that can get up to about 2 foot tall. Still relatively short for a dahlia. In the back, what I'm also trying to do is maybe leave a little bit of walking room here in the beds, so I can get from the middle of the bed towards the back of the bed. And I'm trying to plant all of my dahlias in clumps. And we'll talk about that as I start planting. But along the back over here, again, trying to leave myself a little bit of walking space here between what I hope to eventually have as a hedge back here. I'm gonna have tall dahlias. So that'll be anything that's about 4.5 to 5 foot tall, dahlias. So it'll be a tiered system. You'll have the shortest dahlias in the front, medium, and then really tall. And since the bed is going to be wrapping around, if I continue the bed out this way, I'll have other tall varieties. So it'll be tall varieties wrapped around, shorters in the middle, and then the shortest in the front. That makes sense, right? So enough of all that. Let's start planting these up and I'll talk about what varieties I have. Right here at my feet, I have a Yupon holly. It's an itty bitty thing, but theoretically, hopefully in the next 4 or 5 years, it'll be a 3 to 4 foot thick hedge that'll be going along the backside over here of the flower garden. Right here is a sprinter boxwood. That's going to form part of the front hedge to the flower garden here. But right here in front of me, I have, as I mentioned a second ago, black satins. I believe this gets to 5 foot tall. I'll put the dimensions on screen. I've seen a variety of people plant dahlias in a variety of different ways. And I'm not saying my way is correct, and I'm not saying my way is the best. These guys need a drink. But we can get heavy rains down here, so the ground here can get very wet. So what I like to do is I like to plant my dahlias a little high. There we go. So I was watching Garden Answer, and Laura had planted her dahlia tubers, I think 6 inches deep. And there's a couple of reasons for that. And one of them is the high winds that she gets in her areas. And if she planted them too shallow, like I'm doing here, the other thing that could happen is that those tubers, and I'm speculating here wildly, but those dahlias could dry out relatively quickly. So in her case, planting the dahlia tubers is a better thing. In my case, if I plant my tubers 6 inches down, that means that they're going to be sitting in wetter, moister, possibly flooded soil for that much longer. So I plant my tubers relatively shallow, maybe an inch or two down. The soil here looks very good, very nice. Because I've been amending it, again, for four years or so. So that's it for the black satin. Again, they might get as tall as 5 foot tall this year. If not this year, I would expect that then next year, once the tubers are more established in the ground. I also don't plan on digging up or moving any of these tubers for at least the next 2 to 3 years. And being down here in growing zone 8A, where the ground doesn't freeze, I can do that. I just have to make sure that I put down a good layer of mulch in the fall so that any and all freezes that we do get don't really damage the plants, or the tubers more specifically. The next one we're planting is poo, like Winnie the Pooh, not the other kind of poo. This one's in a fairly big pot, so we're gonna make a fairly big hole here. Now let's see if I can remove this guy without breaking it. Oh yeah, oh this one's really starting to pop down here. There we go. Since this one is so tall, what I will do is come back afterwards and I will tie this to the stake, because if it wind rocks too much, the stem itself will break off the tuber. This grass had just grown up at the end of the weed fabric here. I'm gonna have to cut it back soon. And the last one I'm gonna plant is quite small, but the tuber itself was quite small. It was a division from the bigger tubers. I think this was the original. And then I divided all of these off of it. But it does have growth coming on it. So I want to get it out of this pot, get it into the ground, and let it grow on in the ground. Very small tuber, but again, it has growth. So that one is done. Next two. Now this one I had growing in this tray because the way the tubers had splayed out. This one that I'm planting right here is called Kelvin Floodlight. I really like Kelvin Floodlight because it has really, really big, I believe a yellowish flower. Looks pretty nice. Put a little soil back in there. And position it so it's closest to that stake. And we're just gonna cover this right back up. Huge, huge flower on it. Very beautiful. The ones behind it here are going to be Winky Kernel. Strange name. Now, if you live in a environment where your ground does freeze, so I would say anywhere from zone 7 and down, then you're definitely going to want to pull up your dahlias every year because the tubers will not tolerate freeze. In front of the Winky Kernels, I'm going to be planting Inflammation. Now, Inflammation Only gets to about 1.5 feet, 2 foot tall. Doesn't get very big. There we go. The other thing I'm going to mention is that many of these dahlias are probably planted a little close together. But that's okay because I want them to shade their own bases, and I don't want there to be a lot of room for weeds to grow in and amongst the plants. So if they form a mound or even a thick canopy of leaves at the bottom, that'll help keep the roots cool, and it'll shade out, hopefully, any weeds that may pop in. Hopefully, maybe, possibly. Let's move on to the next couple. This next one is Southern Belle. I don't remember what Southern Belle looks like. If I remember, I'll throw it up on the screen here. One of the problems that I'm having, and it's not really a problem, it's a good thing, is as I'm pulling or digging a hole here in the soil, some of the soil is collapsing back in on itself. And this is good because this tells me this is a loose soil, which is what you want, a good, loose, free draining soil. If you try to plant a dahlia in clay, it's going to die because the tuber will get too wet, it'll stay too wet, and it'll wind up getting root rot pretty quickly. So having a loose, free draining soil is a good thing. In front of it here, I'm going to plant Bishop's Children. Now these are two not so great looking specimens here, and these were grown from seed, but I'm going to throw them in the ground. We're going to see what happens. If they start bouncing back, if they start growing on, then great. If they wind up dying, I'm thinking about coming back and planting the whole front of the bed area with watercolor dahlia, which I have a ton of seed of left, I think. They're very small and they don't, again, look all that great, but maybe they're just in a pot a little too long. And now that they're going to be in the ground with all this hopefully good nutrition and free draining soil, they'll start doing a lot better. And hopefully you can see here, I have a little bit of walking space. This is probably about 2 foot apart. These plants will grow in, but there'll just be a little bit of space right here. And I'm even debating about maybe putting a stepping stone or two so I can walk from the front of the bed here towards the back of the bed. But this next variety I'm going to plant is a color that my wife really likes, which is orange. And this is Sylvia. Sylvia. Now this tuber right here is just barely putting on, whoops, I just dropped it, an eye. But it is putting on an eye. And you don't have to wait for a dahlia tuber to be putting on growth in order to plant it. I was just hesitating on planting a lot of these tubers since I have just divided them, and I wasn't sure if any of these tubers were going to have eyes. So a dahlia tuber, for those of you not in the know, you need the tuber itself, but you also need a neck, a little bit of a neck. Not all dahlias have necks. And then at the end of the neck, there'll usually be an eye. And that's where the stem grows from for the flower. If you only have the tuber itself, maybe no neck, or a neck, but not enough of the original crown for an eye to grow from, then that tuber may put on roots, but it'll never put out another eye because it just doesn't have that part of it to do that. Gently. Now actually I can show you this one, and hopefully you can zoom in. But this is a tuber. I'm not going to be able to show you this on camera. It's probably too small, but it does have an eye. Actually, it has several eyes, I believe. Yes, 2 eyes at least pushing out, which will eventually become stems. Now, the next two I'm going to plant is one that I've seen gaining popularity. I've seen it pop up in more and more gardens. It's one that I'm liking, and it's also one that I'm trying to grow in a pot because I've seen it grown in pots before, up on the deck, and that's David Howard. Has a lovely orange flower. There we go. I'm trying to crush or break any of those leaves there. And it has dark purplish stems. Most dahlias that I've seen have green stem. Sometimes they will darken as they age, as they get taller, but the David Howards seem to start off with a dark reddish stem, and then they have very dark leaves, and then they'll put on the bright orange flowers. There we go. The next one I'm going to plant up, Angels of 7A. Now this was a new one for me, I think last year or the year before. And it puts on, according to the tag, 4-inch large red flower. Again, try to position that towards the back. Set that in there, we go. And the last 4 that I'm going to plant up is another one that I really like, Fleurel. I'll put the name on the screen here. If I'm not mistaken, this gets to about 3.5 feet tall, maybe 4. There we go. As I mentioned before, I was talking about doing the hedge in the back, and I had started that a couple of years ago. Unfortunately, a lot of the shrubbery that I planted here was not sprinter boxwood, but Japanese holly. So I dug them up, moved them. I'll talk about that in the near future. I need to take a bunch of cuttings from my sprinter boxwoods or hit the lotto and I can buy myself 2 and 3 gallon plants. Or if Proven Winners would like to sponsor the channel, I'd be more than happy to accept a donation of a couple of dozen sprinter boxwoods. But what I'm also thinking is that right along here, last year I had like a hedge of verbena bonarosus there, and it was nice and lovely, but unfortunately quite a few of the plants died for various reasons. So I'm thinking about continuing the hedge along the side over here. This will do a couple of things. It'll act a little bit as a windbreak. Wind's coming up from the south. Again, we can get a lot of wind here. So even a short 3-foot or 4-foot hedge would help just break down that wind just a little bit. Every little bit helps, and having a 4-foot hedge here would create a bit of shade, especially in the late afternoon, for the plants. Dahlias do not like intense heat, and I'm sort of at that borderline. Like I don't think you can grow many dahlias in zones 9, 10, or 11. So I'm sort of at that edge. Dahlias prefer cooler climates, and these will grow here, and they will grow quite nicely. Hopefully, the way I have them set up here, this will work for now and into the future. So there will be a little walking area over here to come around towards the back. Eventually, I hope to get taller dahlias back over here along the back edge, but behind me, I like to have a short little hedge, and again, a little walking space between the dahlias and the hedge. Now, I did purchase some additional dahlias this year. I think I got 2 or 3 or 4. I can't remember. I think I got maybe like 3. Not sure. But if you go over to Swan Island Dahlias this Memorial Day weekend, they are having a sale. This is not sponsored. They're having a sale on clearancing out a ton of their dahlia tubers. So if you're thinking about getting into named dahlias or just want to grow dahlias, and if you want some really good quality dahlias, Swan Island Dahlias is a place to get them. As far as I'm concerned, and again, this is not sponsored, they're probably one of the premier dahlia growers here in North America. And I'm not getting paid to say that. I've just received so many quality dahlias from them over the years, and I've grown so many beautiful plants from them. There's also, if you search the interwebs, everybody's having a sale. It's Memorial Day weekend, but for gardeners, this is a great time to be picking up seeds at a discount, plants. I just purchased 2 plants from selectseeds.com. Again, not sponsored. That I'll be talking about in an upcoming video. They're hardening off now, but they look good and healthy, and I'm really excited about that. And again, I got them at a super discounted rate because that's what everybody's doing right now. They're trying to get rid of their inventories in preparation for fall, and then believe it or not, next spring. Search the interwebs, selectseeds.com, Swan Island Dahlias, Brex, White Flower Farm. The list goes on and on. Burpee Seeds, Johnny Seeds. Everybody's having sales right now. So you should go check them out. Maybe get yourself some cheap plants. I may take some time this weekend as well to just peruse online. Maybe pick myself up some vegetable seeds or flower seeds for next year. Maybe not necessarily for this year, but get them now at a low discounted rate. They will store fine until next year if you keep them in a cool, dry place. And then I can use those seeds next year as opposed to spending $5 for a packet of seeds, spend $3.50 now. It's good savings. So I think I've prattled on long enough. Thank you again to all the new subscribers. If you guys have any questions, comments, anything that you want to say, suggest, whatever, please leave those comments below. I'm going to water all this in now off camera, not to bore you guys, and I'll probably come back over the next 2 to 3 or 4 days, and I'll start mulching all this in. So the next time you guys see the space, hopefully all these plants are a whole lot bigger, and maybe even some of them are flowering. With the rain coming next week, I don't know how the weather's going to turn out, so I'm not sure what kind of videos we're going to be doing, but I'm thinking that we may start some of our garden tours. Doing a garden tour of the back deck, show you what's growing, because there's a lot of exciting things happening on my back deck in various pots and grow bags. So I'm excited to show you guys all of that. So if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, click that bell icon to be notified when I do post up a new video, and this way you can follow along with all, again, the various tours, everything I'm growing here in the garden. Woo, it's windy. And with all that being said, I'm going to catch you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.